Hello and welcome to Cat's Novel Adventures and the Book Wyrm Book Club, where I'm being joined by my fantastic friend Alex of Frank Fiction. Hey, Alex.
Hi, Kat. How are you?
I'm good. How you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. I'm always happy to be here. This is one of my favorite parts of BookTube. It's like one of my favorite
Yes.
things to do is to get together with you and talk about stuff. So I'm definitely ready to talk tonight.
Yes, I feel like, my goodness, it's been such a long time since our last conversation. So I'm very excited about our book that we're going to be discussing tonight. So I do want to say welcome to all of our friends who hang out with us on our book club meetings and that read our book, which is
Yes.
Chain Gang All Stars. And I want to say welcome to anyone who is new to my channel and new to the Book Wyrm Club. And for anyone who could not make our live broadcast and are watching this on replay, thank you for doing that as well. And welcome to our discussion. So, Alex, I think this book is probably what I would consider our most challenging book.
100%.
Challenging, yeah.
Most divisive, perhaps.
Yeah.
I definitely think there's going to be a lot of feelings about this book.
Yeah, and I really do think this book is an awesome pick for discussion.
Yeah.
I really do think so.
Yeah,
So,
and we're going to be handling these very sensitive topics in the most respectful way that we can, because this is hard to read. This was probably the hardest book to read that I have so far in 2025.
yes, very serious. Very serious topic because it hits home, at least here in the United States.
Yep.
Don't you agree?
Yes.
So would you like to tell us a little bit about Chain Gang All Stars?
I would love to, as always. Chain Gang All Stars by Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah takes place in a dystopian future that is really not that far off from today, which is one of the things that is so horrific about it. But there is a program that's called CAPE. It stands for the Criminal Action Penal Entertainment Group, where prisoners who have committed murder and are serving at least a 20-year sentence, I believe it said, are allowed to enter into a chain gang. And so what they do is they basically sign their life away, they sign their rights away. They're allowed to be videotaped at all hours of the day, everything that happens to them. And they essentially enter themselves into gladiatorial combat where they have to compete against other prisoners who have committed crimes, and they have to try to survive for 3 years. And if they can survive for those 3 years, then they will reach high freed, which means that they get to re-enter society instead of serving their full sentence for their, however much time. But the likelihood that they will reach high freed is extremely low, which is something that we're going to talk about. And there's two main characters that we follow who are a part of the same chain. And those characters are Thurwar, who is a grand colossal who is getting ready to reach high freedom if she can survive her next 2 matches, and her lover and friend, the Hurricane Stacks, excuse me, and who is probably the other highest competitor. So there's these two really amazing combatants that are together on the same chain, and they undergo some hardships together. So.
Yes, that was amazing.
Oh, thank you.
Summary, very amazing. So, before we talk about ratings, because we always like to talk about our ratings in the beginning, let's see who is joining us for our conversation today.
Hi,
Hello. I believe she attends your sprints
She
on
does.
Friday.
Yes.
Welcome. And hello, Jamie. How
Jamie.
are you? And Stina is
Tina.
here. Hello, Faye. And Zach. Nice to see y'all. And Keaton.
Oh, there's my Keaton.
And Catherine. And certainly polar opposite of the last book. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. We went from a cottagecore, cozy fantasy to a dystopian speculative fiction um, with a brutal storyline.
Yes. Yeah, 100%. I mean, normally these kinds of books, I mean, are right up my alley. Like, I love reading things like this. The back of the
Mhm.
book compares it to 1984 and The Handmaid's Tale, which
Mhm.
now that I've read this book was a very interesting comparison. But yeah, no, that's the thing is like, if you say that, I'm going to be like, oh, I'm really interested because The Handmaid's Tale is one of my favorite books of all time.
And I have not read either one of those books that you mentioned, which
Oh,
is terrible. I never had to read it for school. And, I think I will read them, eventually because I hear so much about them.
yeah,
And I think they have important messages in them.
they
So
do.
I
Yeah.
do think it would be definitely something that I should put on my TBR in the future.
Eventually, yeah, at least The Handmaid's Tale. If I had to pick one of the two, I'd say read The Handmaid's Tale.
Yeah. So Matt is also here. I'm alive, Kat. Matt's been kind of MIA lately. So
Welcome
thank you
back.
for joining us. And hello, Eleanor. This is Eleanor's first book club meeting with us. And
Hello.
there's Heidi.
Hi,
Hello, Heidi.
Heidi.
So Alex and I send each other a list of questions, and we just kind of answer those questions for ourselves and
Yep.
then throw them out here and kind of talk about it and see where the conversation goes. So before we do that, let's talk about our ratings.
Yep.
For those of you that have read Chain Gang All Stars, please put your rating in the comments in the chat. And if you're kind of on the fence with your rating and it could possibly change, let us know that as well, because Alex and I were talking before we went live, and that is how I'm on the fence right now, because I need to have this discussion and
Hmm.
see if I can be swayed to go in a different direction with my rating. It already has changed based on just answering my questions and preparing for our conversation. So, Alex, what is your star rating?
This is, I think, going to be. I have a feeling my spidey senses are going off because Kat and I, for every other book club discussion we've ever done, have always been like spot on identical. And we don't plan it that way. It just happens. I think this might be the first time we disagree, and I'm fine with that. But my star rating, and it very much could change depending on how this conversation goes, but my star rating for Chain Gang All Stars was 4 stars.
Oh, okay. At
So
first, when you were saying
I
all that,
liked
I
it.
thought you were going to give it a big 5 star. The way you
No,
were.
I do not think that this book is perfect. Every time I go into a book, I always want it to be a 5 star. I mean, that's always my hope, right? And with as much hype as this book received, because there was a lot of hype about this
Yes,
book, I
yes.
really thought that it was going to be like the next Handmaid's Tale for me. I wouldn't say that it was that, but I would say that I liked it. And on my channel, a 4 star is me saying it's worth reading one time. Doesn't mean I would read
Mm.
it again, but it's worth reading once.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I kind of agree with your assessment on that. I know that we are also pretty good about, we just don't just pick anything up to read. And
No.
so for us, a lot of times we're pretty good about picking our, 4 and 5 star books. And
Mhm.
so when
It's
we
true.
do run up against one that doesn't fit in our normal
What started the Bookworm
reading,
Club in the
right,
beginning of everything? Yes, absolutely.
then we're a little bit like, are we like losing our touch kind of thing? But yeah, I don't know. And like you said, it's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. And I think that I just have to make sure that I'm not being too hard on the areas that I was disappointed with, to overshadow what was good about this story, if
Right.
that makes any sense.
It does.
And so right now, my rating is a 3 star.
I had a feeling.
It is a
Okay.
3-star. And but with that being said, I'm waffling
That's fair.
because it's like on one hand, I'm like, it feels like a 3-star because of this, this, this. And on another hand, it feels like a 3.5 star because of this, this, this. And then in some
Mhm.
aspects, it's a 4-star because of this, this, this.
Yep.
So it's one of those things I have to get. I just have to land somewhere
Mhm.
and also have people, I guess, like tell me you're being a little harsh taking all those stars away because of that, kind of thing.
Here's the thing, you're allowed to though. If you
I know,
end this and
I
you're
know.
like, actually, it's a 2, I'd be like, okay, you know. But I will definitely touch base at after the discussion
Yes,
to see if anybody else like thinks differently, or even maybe I'll change my opinion too. Like, who
yeah.
knows?
Okay, so let's see what everybody else put in here. Zach said, haven't read Handmaid's Tale, but 1984 rips. And Jamie says, I'm somewhere between 4 and 4.5. Nice.
Yay! I'm
Okay, that's a
happy to
pretty
hear
high
that.
rating, Jamie. And Zach said 2-star. We knew that Zach coming into this discussion, because he already had expressed that he was given a 2-star on Alex's sprints the
Yep.
other night. I'm not on the fence, but I'm always willing to be persuaded. I like your open-mindedness. Very nice. And Stina, 4-ish, just finished it. Need to sit with it a bit, and I'm eager for the discussion. And
That was how I was feeling. I had to
kind of
sit.
yes. And the thing about it is, and this is why I feel like maybe I'm being a little too harsh with the 3, is that I can't stop thinking about it.
Yep,
Like, it's
that's
one of
fair.
those things, like, I can't stop thinking about it. So, and not in a bad way. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah, see,
so
three
then I
star.
feel like, hmm, maybe I don't know. That's why we need this discussion. So Catherine says, I'm on the fence as well. I'm at 4, but leaning towards 3.75. Eleanor says 4. Telecana says 4 stars, though I nearly
Nearly
DNF'd
DNF'd it.
it and picked up the audiobook at 20%, and it made a huge difference.
Oh,
I'm
good.
glad you
Okay.
said that, because I could not DNF it because I was having this discussion with Alex, but there was a moment where I almost wanted to cry because I'm like, I gotta read this book.
Oh, we're gonna talk about that. I didn't know that, Kat.
Yes, and
I wanna know at what
I'm like,
point that was.
I just have to. But I will tell you, the audiobook came available. Originally, the audiobook was 3 weeks out, and I'm like, I don't have time, so I have to push through.
Mhm.
And when it became available, it was easier, and I'll explain
Oh,
why
you
that
did
is.
listen to it.
Yeah,
You
well, I
did.
listened and read with my eyeballs. I did it
Okay.
in tandem, but I started off reading it with my eyeballs, but I'm gonna explain why and what changed for me with that. Matt says, I'm listening to an Aaliyah vinyl album. It's so good, and I'm starting with Girls with All the Gifts. Nice. I'm glad I listened to the audiobook. So much seems like it would fall flat on the page. Yes, and in particular, some parts of it. And Faye said, my stars went supernova. What does that mean? And there's a skull.
Yeah, that's Faye, that almost makes it sound like it was so good you gave it 5, but then the skull makes me think you DNF'd it. I don't know.
Did you
Clarify,
shoot it
please.
off into space, like never to come back? And yes, Stina, I'm glad I had both the audiobook and the physical.
I
And she
only
said,
read
I
the
DNF'd
physical.
it. I DNF'd it.
Oh, okay, there we go. Yeah, I only
Yeah.
read the physical book, by the way. So
Mhm.
any experience with the audiobook, I don't know what that was like, but I'm glad
Right.
people liked the audiobook.
Oh, so Faye says supernovas are Death Star.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay. That makes sense. A dying star.
Yeah, well, I
Yeah.
saw the skull, so I'm like, that doesn't seem too positive. Yeah, so that was one of my issues with the book is when I first started reading it. I'm going to tell you, I think the first chapter of the book and the last chapter of the book are my most favorite chapters of the book. And the reason why is there's so much in the interactions between the characters
Mm-hmm.
that just hit me in my heart.
Yeah.
Like, just there was just so much importance with it. And one of the questions we have here that I had chosen that I found on bookclub.com was about the beginning, you know. And I just, when it started off so strong, I was like, yeah, this is going to be a great book. And then as I started reading it, the footnotes were driving me crazy.
Oh, okay. Yep.
And this is not the first time I've had an issue with footnotes. I had the issue with Sense and Sensibility because of footnotes, and I gave my first time I read Sense and Sensibility a 3 because I was like, I feel
Mm,
like I keep getting taken out of the story, out of the
okay.
story. And because at that point, I didn't feel like I was reading a fictional book either. I felt like I was reading a nonfiction book. Like it wasn't, it was, and then I think also too, just the jumping from the, and you know me, I love multiple POVs and I love lots of characters, but I think it was in such a way that I was like, I just feel like I'm all over myself. Like I can't focus on what's going on. When I
Okay.
got the audiobook, it kind of reined all that in and you didn't know you were listening to footnotes, if that
Oh,
makes
okay.
sense. Because it
Okay.
wasn't like it said footnote
Footnote.
and then said whatever it was. So it was more
Yeah.
natural when you were listening to it in that point. So that's my thing with why the audio helped me out a little bit. It helped me to focus a little more. And then I could go back and forth, with it if I needed to. So since I brought up that question about the first chapter, I think we'll start there if that's okay with you.
Sure. Yeah. Lay it
Okay,
on me.
so it says when we first meet Loretta Thurwar in the prologue, she is a new link going up against Melancholia Bishop, a
Mhm.
renowned fighter approaching high freed status. And
Mhm.
when the novel continues, 3 years have passed, and Thurwar is now in Bishop's position as a Grand Colossal.
Mhm.
What was the significance of her first fight, and how was her character changed since then, and what keeps her fighting?
Are you wanting me to start with this
Yes,
one, Kat?
if you don't
Okay.
mind. I'm gonna put the
Yep.
spoilers, banner up
Oh, yeah.
because, we're gonna get into spoilery, details.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep. Sounds good. So, the very beginning of the book, of course, we're presented with Thurwar. She is entering her first battle in her arena ever. And we end up figuring out, of course, that she's fighting for her life. She has this really horrible weapon, and she's going against literally the top person in at all of their sports at that point, because it's considered a hardcore sport.
Mhm.
And it is assumed that she's going to die. And what's interesting is you're putting somebody who's never fought before against this woman who is very clearly a death machine. This is her last fight before she reaches freedom. There's a point later on in the book when Thurwar is given a newbie and she just absolutely wrecks him, right? Does not give him the opportunity that Melancholia Bishop gives her, which Melancholia Bishop actually gives her a fair chance to
Yes.
kill her. Like, because you can tell, I mean, we're realizing she doesn't really want to be freed. It's the
Mhm.
same thing that happens with, some of the other colossals. We end up seeing that with Sunset. He does the same thing. It's like he just feels like he can't survive life outside, so he would rather die. And Melancholia, she was going to fight. She wasn't going to give it to Thurwar, but Thurwar, that was the best chance that she could have had to live. And she
Exactly.
decided in that moment that she really wanted to live. Because, I mean, she was absolutely terrified for her life. And she ends up killing Melancholia. She claims her hammer, kills her with it. And then she becomes known for that symbol. And she carries that hammer with her for her 3 years on the chain gang. And so over the course of the 3 years, I mean, she starts out being this really bloodthirsty seeming person, like very stoic. They call her the Blood Mother. She has all these different nicknames. And she ends up meeting Sunset Harkless. and he pretty much convinces her that they could do it better, like they could really be a team. And over the course of the story, like when she was presented with that young boy, and it was his first fight, I genuinely was wondering if she was going to try to like help him in some way, and or the way that Melancholia did for her, and she didn't. She just absolutely blew him away
Mhm.
and killed him
Mhm.
instantly. And you realize that, like, no, she's really trying to reach high freed. She's not giving anybody any quarter. It doesn't matter who they
Mhm.
are. But there's one person that she loves the most in the whole world who's on her team. And, she ends up, of course, over the course of the story, finding out that she's going to have to fight the person that she loves the most, and that's Stax. And so it gives us this really great dilemma of wondering, is that going to be the moment when she going to do what Melancholia Bishop did? Is she going to give up?
Right.
Because
So that, yes.
yeah, because she very clearly over the course of the story is wrestling with the fact that she doesn't feel like she deserves to live. I mean, she is
Well,
like
and
so
I think that's
depressed.
what the significance of the first
Y-
fight is,
yes,
because it comes full circle to
yes,
where Thurwar is now in the same position that Melancholia was in,
yeah,
but Melancholia didn't want to play the game anymore. She didn't
no,
want to do that and help them out. She was tired of playing their game.
hmm,
And so she was given her advice: shave your head, don't play their game, and trying to, if you really want to live, this is your opportunity. And I even wrote
yeah,
that down, is that
swing
Thurwar
through, not at, yeah,
says she stepped forward to her destiny.
hmm,
Um, and it's because she had her chance. She has her chance at freedom, and she realizes that she really wants to live at that point with Melancholia, and she's given the opportunity and she takes it. I also do think that how she changes is that she then goes on a journey of self-forgiveness as well as redemption, because we find out what her crime is, why she is in there,
hmm,
and as it moves on, she's conflicted about, yes, I'm going to fight, I'm going to do this, I want to live, but do I really deserve to live because I took someone else's life? And then I think what keeps her going too is that she's trying to protect Stax. And we do have a question about, those two and that decision that they have to make later on. But
yeah,
I do think the protecting of Stax when they fall in love with one another, and she knows that, she gets on the outside, she can't protect Stax the way she can if she's on the inside. So that raises some, questions as well. Now, of course, they didn't know that their outcome was going to be initially that they were going to have to fight each other either,
right,
you
right.
know.
Yeah, we
But
learned that like halfway through the book, but I kind of had an inkling about it when she was like, "Oh yeah, the rules are changing." It's like, is it going to be something to do with Stacks? Because that's the only thing she cares about. She doesn't care about
well,
anything.
I started having inklings of it because I'm like, she's getting so close to her high freedom that
Hmm.
I just don't believe these people are going to allow anybody to walk away. We know that the person that did walk away to give these gladiators or
Hmm.
fighters any kind of hope was a plant. It
Yep.
wasn't, it wasn't a real thing. And they know that. I mean, people know that, at least the fighters know that. And so, you know it once they did that, I was like, yeah, I have a feeling that they're going to have to fight each other because they're not going to want Thorward to leave the prison system.
No, no. They were very devious with the links.
Yeah.
Because of course they're, for those of you who might not have read it, they're referred to as links because they're links in a chain and they're part of a chain
Mhm.
gang, and that's where that comes from. Um, but it's very obvious the longer that you get in the book that the people who watch these games are very vindictive, but at the same time act like they really care about these people, and that's
Right.
something that I'll end up wanting to talk about too.
Yes. Plus the
Because yeah, because the mentality that they have is very much like, oh, we love you so much, we're rooting for you, but also you deserve to die because
Mhm.
you're a murderer, and
Right.
if that happens to you, like, so what?
Mhm.
And you really can't have both. And I think that's a big theme in the book is like you can't be talking out of one side of your face and say how much you like value human life while you're openly willing to watch it be destroyed and
Mhm,
watch it be
mhm.
destroyed joyfully.
Right,
And
right,
and and
yes.
and you know, yeah.
So Angel's here, and she says she DNF'd it. I was listening to the audiobook, so we have another DNF. And enjoy your discussion, ladies in chat. I just wanted to pop in to say hi and hit the like button. Well, thank you.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate that. Footnotes. Interesting.
Yes, there are footnotes. I want to see how I'm sure I can find one for
Yeah,
you.
so if you listen to it mainly on audiobook, you had no idea, Stina.
Yeah,
And
so
some of
there's
them
like these
were
little
some
notes.
of them were very large. Some of
Yeah,
them, there was one footnote that was like almost the whole
half a
page.
page. Yeah.
Yeah. So, how did the audio deal with the footnotes? I was reading on ebook, and the footnotes didn't always work. They just blended it in. So whenever they got to where the footnote was, they just said whatever it was, and so it seemed natural in the way they read it. Like I wouldn't, if I would have started, I would have never known it had footnotes, but I knew, because I started off that way. And then question answered. The footnotes are why I'm glad I had both the audio and physical. I could see them and the audio made sense. Yeah, that's exactly how I was feeling. Interesting. Didn't think about that, but you're right. Audio made the footnotes more natural to consume. On ebook, having to go to the footnotes was rough. Yeah, and so if you have to work really hard towards that kind of stuff, that it just gets, for me, and I'm not trying to be a lazy reader, just for me, it just seemed like it was too much work because there were a lot of them. It wasn't like it was just like one little footnote here or there. I felt like I was reading a textbook sometimes. And I didn't like that feeling. So Liz is here. Hello. I'm halfway through the audio, but couldn't resist getting spoiled tonight. Yeah, we were talking on Tuesday. We were doing our 25 for 2025 update with each other. And I was telling her about how we were reading it and my feelings and everything about it. And she's like, I've got to read this book. So I hope you will continue reading it, Liz, even if you get spoiled. So, so one of your questions was, what do you generally think about dystopian novels? Do you like them more or less when they are close to reality? Thought this was a good question.
Oh, thank you. I love dystopian novels. I think that they're really great as long as it's not something that's been overdone. Like, for example, when Hunger Games first came out, and then there were all these like copycats trying to do like teenagers in some sort of,
Mhm.
weird future. Like, I think Maze Runner might have been one. I
Yeah,
know
very true.
Divergent was a huge one, right? But like or books that do it interesting and differently for the first time. I think that
Mhm.
those are books that really stick out. So, Handmaid's Tale, 1984, The Hunger Games, those are all examples of books that, like, when you read them, they feel very impactful. But I will say that the world is very, very different than our own in those books. So, like when 1984 was written, of course, it was before 1984, and people like genuinely never believed that anything that was in that book could ever happen. So they thought
Mhm.
that George Orwell was just like an extreme pessimist when he wrote that. Is like, oh my gosh, you're thinking of all these horrible things. Margaret Atwood with The Handmaid's Tale, she actually has said in interviews before that everything that she put in The Handmaid's Tale, she never wanted anybody to be able to look at her and be like, oh, you're so horrible, you made all of these things up, because everything that she put in the book has happened in history at some point.
Mhm.
And so it's
Mhm.
very it feels very real in that way, right? Like it's
Mhm.
very possible. I would say Chain Gang is a dystopian novel. It's just a dystopian novel that is very, very near future to what we're currently living in, to the point where there's not that break in reality that I think
Mhm.
would come for a lot of people reading dystopian. There's not a joy in it because it's not so far removed that you can kind of be like, oh, well, that's not happening yet. The purpose, I think, of this book, with it being dystopian, being speculative fiction, is it's meant to it's meant to invoke a sense of, this is terrifying because it could happen. It feels like
Mhm.
it's
Mhm.
possible to
Mhm.
happen anytime soon, because we're experiencing, for those of you who are not in the United States right now, in the US, there were people who were proposing the idea of citizenship being a game show, like that actually
Mhm.
being a real thing. And like the obsession with reality TV. And so I could see maybe this book, people not liking it as dystopian because of how real it is. It's almost too real.
Well, to me, it didn't read quite like a dystopian, and I guess because of the dystopian books that I have read are more YA dystopian. So I've read like Ready Player One and Ender's Game and Maze Runner and Hunger Games, the Divergent series. And to me, the world, they might make a reference to how the world used to be, some kind of reference to it. Even The Giver, they make references to things of how it was, and especially if you read The Giver, all the entire series. So for me, I just felt like the only thing that made this seem like science fiction or dystopian was the technology.
Mm-hmm.
And really and truly, is it possible we have that kind of technology? I mean,
We have
you know what I'm saying? Like, we don't
similar things, yeah,
100% know, like the
not in
military,
every way.
some kind of technology like that. Like, I just think to myself, there's a lot we don't know, when it comes to our government and stuff like that, and what's being created, and we don't know. We don't 100% know. So it didn't read like a normal, what I consider a dystopian story. So if I had to answer the question, I do like dystopian novels, at least the ones that I read in the YA genre, the YA category, not really a genre, but a category. And I think I like it to be less close to reality. Do you
That's
like it to be more close to reality?
No, I mean, I this is probably the first. I'm sorry, Barker is now seeing people outside. Bubby, hey.
And Barker's saying,
Oh,
I want more.
yeah, yeah. Come on, Bub. There we go. His father will take care of him. But I will say that I like my dystopian to be removed from reality to a certain degree because I think that it's easier to engage with the material. This
Hmm.
is the first time I've read a book where the future seems so close. And I mean, I'm
Yes.
sure I've read other ones, but like the level of I mean, like this book made me extremely sad, like very
Hmm.
depressed, and it was difficult to read. And it was difficult to read because, and I like that you were talking about the footnotes part of it because I actually really liked the footnotes. And the reason that I like them is because some of the footnotes are related to the fictional part of the story, and some footnotes are related to the way that our prison system is today.
Hmm.
And I think that the author was really trying to make it relevant, and he was trying to say that, like, look, I'm not making up these things, this is something that's actually going on, and here's the statistic to back it up, here's the part of our law and the code, this is what it says, you should know that this is going on. And that I would never describe this book as fun. Like, you're not
No,
reading this
no,
because it's
no, no, no.
fun. You
Right.
know what I mean? And so it's like,
Mhm.
if you pick up dystopian novels because you find the Hunger Games fun, you probably won't like this.
Right, right, and that's one of my problems with the book, in general, is that it didn't meet the expectations of what I was going into it, for sure. Stina said, "I listened to Handmaid's Tale right when John Ashcroft was trying very hard to take away women's rights." Did you pick up on the hammer and sickle symbology with Thur War and Stacks? And did you think it went somewhere? Um, I didn't
No,
really. I did not. That
no,
went over my head.
I didn't think it
Um,
did.
I couldn't make sense of the premise, and that's why I DNF'd it, so I disagree. I like dystopia, but I want it to make sense. Hey, Mama Maggie, welcome. And the reality of it makes it better for me. I don't want to say I like it better because it infuriates me, but the reality makes it a better book for me. That's a good way of looking at it. It didn't feel very real to me due to the structure of the show and government, short battles, and far too much freedom to protest. And I did like those factual footnotes as well. People need to know the history and how close we to this could be to this being reality. And I don't disagree with that as far as like learning the factual information about it. I think for me, and this is one of the things for me, is that I went into this book thinking it was going to read like a Hunger Games.
Yeah,
Like,
I did
I
too.
went
I did
into it
as well.
thinking this was going to be a story about Stax and Thurwar, their relationship as participants in the Chain Gang All-Stars. That is what I went into. So I think I was a little bit disappointed that it didn't meet those expectations. And Alex and I had a similar situation when we read another book, Remarkably Bright Creatures, that was another book that was super hyped, and it wasn't as clear to us. Our expectations weren't met for that book as well, and that did impact the enjoyment of reading the book because you're thinking of it one way and then it's
Yep.
not doing that. So for
Yep.
me, I think I was just kind of like, almost felt like it was more nonfiction I was reading. And I think this goes with the question you asked about, did you find the use of statistics meaningful, or did the author overplay his hand? And I think that's where the footnotes came in. I disliked those footnotes because it almost felt like that was a nonfiction aspect of it. That if I wanted to learn that, I would have rather have read a nonfiction book about it. Like, I feel like I would have gotten more out of it than it being like fiction, nonfiction kind of thing. Like, it didn't feel like this was entertaining. Does that make sense?
Well,
Am I?
would that have been the case if you had only listened to it, though? If you hadn't realized, like maybe that wouldn't have been the case if you only listened to it.
Yeah, but I also do kind of feel like the going to the different perspectives also, I felt kind of like I was being kind of like beaten over the head with the message.
So you felt like it was heavy-handed. Yeah, that was
Yeah.
what I was wondering. Is like that was kind of
Yes.
what I was getting at with is like, is it that it's heavy-handed? And I would say that's probably the part of the book where it lost points for me. Is like
Mhm.
there were certain aspects when people in the comments were saying, yeah, it didn't really make sense to me. I think that a lot of the story to me makes sense if, when you read it from beginning to end and you realize like the cohesive narrative he's creating, it really makes sense. But there were certain little bits in it that
Mhm.
didn't.
Yes.
And I know we're going to talk later about Mari's conversation with the reporter, because I think that
Mm.
that's a really good moment to talk about something that was said that I didn't think made sense in the book. Because there was an argument that the reporter was making, and I went, "What?" But so
Well,
there were those moments. There were moments in there where I was like, I think that it could have been presented better.
mhm.
And I might be the only one who feels this way, and I want other people in the comments to let me know, but I really like the other perspectives, and I actually found it refreshing when we got away from Stax and Thurwar to talk about the inmates, like Singer, Hendrix, and he's in prison, and what he goes through to make him decide that he's going to become a link, right, and the
Right.
brutality he faces with is Simon J. Kraft. You can never forget his name now, Simon J. Kraft, and everything that he went through, and like the weapon that he got turned into, the perspective of the people who run the games, and their
Mhm.
decisions about like why they're making these choices and like why they feel like it's justified. I think like things like that were really interesting. And then we would kind of go back in and get the perspective of Thurwar or Stax. And there were times, especially when they were on the road, that it felt like things kind of slowed down for a minute, and then we would jump, and it would be something would be like violent, and something
Mhm.
going on, and we
Mhm.
would go back, and it would be everybody just kind of thinking and ruminating. There's a lot of ruminating in this
Yes,
book.
and I mean, I liked the different perspectives, and I
Yeah.
liked getting the perspectives of people in the different camps, people that were supporting it, people that were trying to fight it, even
Yeah.
the person that created the influence weapon. I think
Oh
it's the
God.
format. The format is what was jarring to me. I almost, and I'm not gonna tell this man how to write his book, it is his book. But for me, I think I would have enjoyed it more if it would have been in parts like, or short story format, even because it almost felt like they were little short stories, but it went back and forth, the back and forth thing. And I think that's where I was like losing focus and then trying to keep track of them. That had it been like the beginning and we were introduced to all the chain link people, and then we got another part where we were in the perspective of our spectators and the people who run, the organization. And then you had another part where you were into the person that created the influencer or whatever. I think for me, it would have just been easier to digest it a little bit better. And I think that's where there were lulls that happen when they were changing these things that I don't know. I would get bored at certain points. I'm like,
Yeah.
because I want to be back to the action of learning about the links in the chain gang. You know what I'm saying? Like, if all of that would have been the story, and then it could have ended the way it ended, kind of have it like the book ends, starting off the way it did and then ending the way it did, where you come back to our chain gang or whatever. And so to me, it's just a structural thing where my disappointment lies in the book. And so that's why I say, is it fair for me to, take off so many points for that? Because that's what was the struggle for me in reading the book. So I don't know.
I would agree in definitely with certain parts that makes a lot of sense to me, because it seemed like later on in the book he was trying to do more world building, like introducing the woman who created the influencer. It's like at that point you start realizing like he's trying to add more into like the narrative of how things got to be this way, instead of putting that, he didn't front load it, he kind of backloaded it, right? Now there was one thing that I really liked how he did it, which was we get introduced to Hendrix and we get introduced to Simon J. Kraft. And then we don't really understand their significance yet. We just realize that we get to see why they end up becoming links eventually. But then we also get the perspectives of like Emily and Will, like, and they're the ones that are, they're watching. They're so gross. Oh God, they're so gross.
I know.
I hated them more than anybody else in the book, probably. But yeah, the spectators, and there's this moment after we've gotten used to Singer and we see the way that he fights, we've gotten used to Simon, when she's talking and she's like, oh yeah, but I'm watching reruns from a year ago. And we just got done hearing about how Stax and Thurber have to go against two rising stars who have, that's two men who've teamed up together and they've been able to climb the ranks in a way that nobody else ever has. And it dawns on you that you're like, oh shit, it's them. That's why they were introduced. That's why we're, learning their story. But you realize that their story isn't present. Their story's from the past. And that was one thing I personally felt was well done. I liked that.
Yeah, I don't know. I was just like, I wanted to know what the significance was at that moment, kind of thing. And like, I felt like I had to go back sometimes. And that's why I was glad I had a physical copy of it, because then I could go back, even though I listened to it, I could go back and read the passages for it. And that's on me. That's just me as a reader. It's not on the author. I mean, I think the author presented these groups of people very well in it. So that's where I'm at. Eleanor says, I like the addition of the footnotes. It was interesting to see how the author wound real life events into his story. And Mama Maggie said, when I read The Handmaid's Tale in 1988, I had a friend whose family was Kurdish and escaped Iraq. I felt it was more about Islam than Christianity, but was written as Christianity because if the author had used Islam as an oppressive religion, they would have been threatened with death. That's interesting.
I mean, Margaret Atwood is from the U.S., though, so that wouldn't have been.
I would hope it would not have been an issue.
Yeah.
I appreciated that about the footnotes, but it took me back to grad school, not in a fun way. We discussed a lot of this stuff in class on criminal punishment. And both religions have bad track records for women's rights.
That is true.
I went into the book without even reading the synopsis.
Nice. Well, that's probably good for you then, because you had no, you didn't build it up in your mind of
Right, you didn't have
what
any
you thought it should have
expectations.
been.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
didn't have any
yeah,
expectations. The footnotes about solitary confinement really made me feel the depressive feeling in the chapter titled Simon Craft.
yeah.
Yeah, I believe it or not, even though Simon Craft was not a good human being and
No, not at
why
all.
he ended in there, I had a lot of compassion for him because of his mental illness and the
Mhm,
fact that they were not addressing that and the fact that they were using him for enjoyment purposes and the fact that he gets put in solitary confinement because he's defending himself and nobody's there to help him and then they use him as a pawn in their own little sick game,
yep,
and then they get mad at him because
he killed a
he
guy.
kills the guy, and
Yep,
it's like you're not supposed to kill the guy. And then they put the influencer on him, and I could just see it in my mind
yep,
because he had like this weird grin on his face. It kind of reminded me of that horror movie Smile.
yes,
That's what I had in my mind when I
yep,
was thinking about it and about how they took somebody. Yeah, he committed his crime. We didn't get any backstory on that, so we don't know like all the circumstances. We just know that he's a horrible person based on what these policemen are saying. But it's like it totally changed him from what he was and could have been rehabilitated perhaps
mhm,
to choosing so he wouldn't have to have the influencer, which I thought was very interesting. That's the reason why Thurwar goes to the chain gang to be in
yep,
that because she didn't want to feel the that influencer anymore. So I thought
yep.
that was very interesting, that they had that in common.
Well,
Um,
Ajay-Brenyah, I think, was really trying to express in this book that it's not that people don't deserve to be punished for the crimes that they commit. That's not the point. It's that
right.
cruel and unusual punishment is supposed to be illegal for a reason. And, there's he brings up the laws about what torture is and
Hmm.
what is legally torture. And it's but like, well, if you're being tortured by the state, then it's
Yes.
fine. But you're
Hmm.
not allowed to torture somebody like as a civilian. And so it's just how absolutely twisted that is because there are people who do get thrown. I mean, he puts the statistics in there. They get thrown into solitary confinement for years. And it's like it breaks people. And that is cruel and unusual punishment.
And that's exactly what they want to do. They want to break them to the point that they're not a person anymore.
Right.
So yeah, he was the one I had a lot of empathy for. Um, not because of his crime, obviously, but just
Right.
because of what he endures and where he ends up. And that ultimately, excuse me, that is Tootie trying to get in the room. Come on. Um, and just what he becomes because of like the lack of freedom or anybody helping him. Like there's no one there in this prison system that speaks up for anybody. Like he has no lawyer, he has nobody. In fact, there's the one part when the other guy tells him, well, you can make a complaint, but you do realize who you're making the complaint to, and it's
Yep.
Lawrence.
Yep.
So
It's
I would dare him
horrible.
basically to make a complaint to Lawrence because then he's going to get the influencer to the point I think that it would have just probably been like it would have just killed him at some
Yeah, I mean, well, they talk about how people like claw their eyes out and like go mad. It was amazing he still remembered his name. And then we
name.
realized by the end that he actually forgot his middle name, that he was
Yes.
influenced so hard that he couldn't remember what the J stood for.
Hmm.
And that was
It's
awful.
sad. Yeah,
Yeah.
sad. So Zach said it could have and should have done something a lot more interesting with the arenas and weapons. They could have had really interesting technologically enhanced weapons. The only reason I would say that they would not have done that is because I think it could have backfired and they could have technically used those weapons. I think their weapons were primitive in a way because they could still control them.
Yeah, because
I think
they were the ones
if
that
the
had the advanced
gladiators had the
weapons.
technology, technology like the other people did, I think that they would have been more of a threat
I would
to
agree with that. Yeah.
them. It felt like a choice, though. I wonder what was behind it. And once I figured out that the two main characters were Thurmore and Stax, I liked the different POVs, but it took a while for me to get there. Yeah. And then the focus of the story was the people, not the tech or the weapons. That's true. I get that that's the prison system, but to get excited and enjoy watching it didn't feel realistic, but also wasn't satire. Actually, when we were looking up the genre for it, it did say that satire was
I
part of it,
agree with
which
Kay. That
I
is not
don't think it
satire
is,
because there's
but
nothing funny about it. There's
right.
nothing. It is a critique. I mean, satire is a critique of society, but it's supposed to be in like a biting, sarcastic way. And this was just very front and center.
Yeah,
Like this is
it
just the way
is
that
because it's just too close to reality.
yes,
That's the issue. I
yeah.
only like Henrik's and Jungle Man. The main two were boring and interchangeable for me. Don't think writing women was a strong suit of the author. That's
I,
interesting.
to a certain degree, I can understand that. I think that there was a lot that was similar about their personalities, and the main thing was just whether they were stoic or whether they were talkative and bubbly. But there was a
Yeah.
lot else they shared that was similar. Yeah.
You really don't think in our reality TV world, marketing couldn't turn this show into a
I
hit?
want to talk about that
Yeah.
so bad.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh.
Yes, totally, but not setting them free after. Well, that's one of the things, Faye. I don't think they ever had intentions to set them free. I think that's why one reason why they chose them to fight at the end is because I think the people in charge thought they were going to fight to the death, that both of them would have died from their injuries of fighting one another, being these great colossals. That's what I thought that they think. I don't think they ever want anybody to be free. Um,
I kind of got that feeling as well. And I know I'll talk more about that when we get to that, like
yeah.
talking about the end cap. But I would agree with you.
So your second question was, what parallels does this book show with our lives now? And we have talked about like the prison system, but I
Yeah,
think the reality TV and the
that's what I want to
glorification
talk
of
about.
celebrity, I
Yes,
think
that's
that is similar. I think extreme
yeah.
sports like MMA, cage fighting. I
Hmm.
think issues with violence, the racism, social media, and what happens with social media.
Yep.
And then the wealthy equaling power and capitalism. So I
Hmm.
think there's a lot of parallels with our lives now. And the reality TV thing,
Oh God.
talk about it, Alex.
Oh God. Yeah, so I need to preface this by saying that reality TV, I am not one of those people that's like, "Oh, I have a guilty pleasure show like Love Island or the Kardashians." No, I hate hate reality television so much because I think it's gross. I think it and no, I'm not hating on any of you. If you like watching Love Island or The Bachelor, I don't care. That's totally fine, but they're to me so much of it is scripted and you can tell that it's fake and you can tell that they're doing it because they're trying to set people up to have conflicts and things like that, right? Where it's like it's always has to be dramatic, otherwise it's not interesting. So the
Right.
reality always has to be something bad is happening. So for me, when I was reading this book, while there is the jump from, oh, you're watching, Kardashian level drama to you're watching people murder each other, the author was trying to imply that it didn't happen overnight that people became fans of this. It wasn't like, oh, it secretly everybody is a bloodthirsty monster who just wants to watch violence. And you see that with Emily, right? Is like you go and you kind of you start tiptoeing your way in and maybe you begin by kind of doing one of these and you're like watching through your hand and you go, oh, who could ever like this? And then you get this weird fascination where you keep going back and keep going back. And I think
Yeah.
that's the pull of reality television. I think that's about the marketing. I think it's about the way that things are filmed. The fact that there was, you could pay to watch the battles, but Link Life was free. And you could
Mhm.
watch, you could get to know the characters so that it entices you. Well, you want to know what happens to them when they fight to the death, right? So then you go to the arena and you watch it in person or you pay that membership fee so you can get it all the time. Um, and that's what I liked about the book too is it was trying to show that it's not that everybody's bad and that everybody wants terrible things to happen to other people. It's that you can be desensitized to anything
Yes.
if it's done in the right way.
Yes. Yeah, because that was one of my question was the lives of hard action sports fans are revealed through the point of view of Will and Emily, a couple that watch the battlegrounds and reality series link life together. A reluctant fan, Emily's interest in hard action sports teeters between horror and fascination. And initially, Emily struggles with it
Yeah.
because there's that part where Will, who is an asshat,
Oh
is
God, I
trying
hate
to get
him.
into the pants of his coworker because his coworker showed interest in it and his wife did not. So
Yep.
then, because Emily's getting into it and she's watching these back things, it's almost like she considers it like a bloody drama playing out, almost like they're characters. They're not real people. And I
Yep.
think part of that is because they get the celebrity names. And it's almost like because they have these celebrity names, and that's why I think it's very important that Third War keeps her name.
Yeah.
I love the part when that Mickey guy wants to call her feisty something, and
Yeah.
she's like, "No, my name is Loretta Thorwar." And like
Yep.
he was always trying to bait her. He didn't like the fact that she wasn't going to take on a persona. And I think that's important because I think at that point you have a sense of detachment,
Yep.
especially if you're watching this program on television, because these people are not real people to you.
Right.
You know, they are they're a persona. They're a, like, an Avenger or, wrestling,
Hmm.
saying. So
Yeah.
I think in that respect, and then it says, why do audiences watch the matches and how do they cope with the realization that they are complicit in these acts of violence? I think initially they might feel kind of like, ooh, I'm not going to watch, whatever. But I don't think they feel bad about it because
No.
it's
No.
clearly become this big, humongous sport for them.
Well, and Third War and Stacks are trying to change the game where they're trying to show people their humanity. They're trying to be, like it is said that Stacks is always trying to come from a place of love. She always opens up her shows with like, "I love you," and at the beginning, to me, that was super weird. I was trying to figure out, I was like, what does that mean at the beginning of the book? Because I'm like, how do you do that and then go and murder people and then that change anybody's mind, right? And then
Mhm.
over the course of the book, you realize that it's like, oh, it's because slowly but surely people are realizing that they are human beings. Like it's like everybody knows that. It's weird. In this book, it's like people know that in their heart that they're watching human beings, but they're willing to it's like they can easily set that aside because they're like, oh well, you're murderers. And the best example of that is when they go to that like little conference where they're talking and Stacks and Thurwar are talking and Stacks says to one reporter who's kind of getting on them of like, well, if
Yeah.
you've never been on our team and you've never been on a chain, then maybe you should leave it to us. And the reporter tries to reply, well, I've never been accused of, and then gets
Yeah.
immediately cut off. And it's like, well, that's their thing, right? It's like, well, I can say whatever I want to you because you're a murdering rapist, terrible whatever, as Simon J. Kraft is, rapist motherfucker, right? um if you can look at people that way, then if they die, you're like, who cares?
Right.
And
Right. They're
so
disposable.
right. And so that's why I think that the author had to kind of balance that out then with the people who are trying to fight for justice. He's trying to show that no, there are people out there who don't agree. It's not everybody, because like in the Hunger Games, sorry to go back to the Hunger Games, but like you have everybody in the Capitol they're like bloodthirsty, they love the fights between the different districts, right? And in this book you see, well, no, there are people who are resisting, and it's actually a lot more people than you think. And it's kind of supposed to almost like restore your faith in humanity, that it's like not everybody in the future likes this stuff. There will always be people who want
Right.
to fight for
I
justice.
think also too, it depends on the people that want to fight. What is their stake in the fight?
Yeah.
Is it because they have a family member that went to prison? Well, we know some
Yeah.
people who Mary does.
Yep.
But I think that's part of it too, is that there are people that don't even know this is going on because they don't have a stake in the fight. They don't know anyone that has been put into prison. They have not been touched by murder in some way or
Hmm.
whatever. And so then you've got the ones that are the abolitionists, and it's
Yep.
because they have a stake in the fight. And they
Yep.
realize that this, even if they've done this, they should not be treated this way,
Yeah.
based on what they have seen happen.
But then you have the Lynx who believe that they do deserve it, like
Yeah,
Gunny Puddles. And that was weird. That was actually very fascinating to me that you have this guy who's so antagonistic because he doesn't think that anybody deserves kindness because he's like, no, I'm a murdering bastard. All of us are murdering bastards. We deserve everything that we get. And it was so weird that this asshole is the one that had the same mentality as the spectators.
yeah.
You like, I didn't expect that. So,
Well, but
yeah.
I think he's also a character because we know that not everybody that goes to prison, because everybody's going to prison for different things. And I know these are
Yeah.
all murderers or whatever, but
Yeah.
their type of how they came about to murder someone also is a big difference too. Were they under the
Yes.
influence of drugs? Were they coerced? Were they defending themselves? I mean,
Mhm.
Stacks, the whole reason is she was trying to defend herself because she was about to be sexually assaulted.
Yes.
So there's different reasons that they're in there. And so there is the opportunity that you can change from the time you're in. If you were under the influence of drugs when you committed your crime, and
Mhm.
once you're not taking those drugs any longer, you have a chance of being rehabilitated and
Mhm.
going through. So I don't think that it's not black and white.
Yeah.
And so I think that was one thing the author was trying to show is that he's the type of person that he possibly murdered somebody because he enjoyed murdering somebody. So
Yeah.
in his mind, I have nothing to lose because I'm going to die in prison anyway, and all of y'all deserve to die too. So he's the type that we don't want to get back on the streets. You know what I'm saying? Like he needs to have whatever the new way they're going to do prison, he needs to be kept in that facility or whatever, however he's going to have it happen to him. So Zach says, I also felt like the Emily and Will thing never went anywhere. It didn't conclude, it just stopped. Yeah, I think in that respect, I think that was for us to have a snapshot of how the spectators, just to give us a snapshot of that. Because I actually reached out to Alex because I kept thinking, did he ever pick someone to show the perspective of a person who was the victim of the crime or the family, you know, how they were impacted by um their sister or father or somebody getting murdered in their family, because their perspective about what's going on would be different too. And I thought that would be fascinating to realize, to because there's two sides of it. You've got some people that would be forgiven and would want them to be in jail and not participating in this. And then you had the reporter who they don't want them to get out if they win.
No.
Because how
And
can you
and we
do
should
that?
have had more of that. Like,
Yeah.
it's actually kind of weird that we didn't
So
in a
that's
way.
why I couldn't remember at first. And that's why when I reached out to you, I'm like, it
Yeah.
had to be, he couldn't have just been all people that are against like the prison system, against. You had to have somebody. And then when I realized, I answered my own question. So yeah, I think, and that's Zach, the reason why I think for me, it would have been better to have it like a short story kind of situation where you had Emily and Will like apart. Like you didn't have to keep going back and forth to them. It could have just been apart, and you could have had chapters about their progression to see their point of view.
I think it was more meaningful to go back and forth because you get this sense of time passing. Like for Emily, it's like she starts out it's horrible and she's at the arena, right? But then you go back and you realize, oh, she's been watching Link Life, and then the further on you go, it's like, oh, she's been watching a lot of reruns of Link Life. Like
Right.
she's super invested in these people, and then she's just basically goes over the deep end, she just like falls off the wagon as
Yeah.
it were, and kind of becomes she actually I would argue becomes about as bad as Will.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I don't think that we would have been able to really feel that if it was just like one section of the book and that was it. And that's just my opinion. I
Yeah.
like the back and forth of perspectives. I do. Because I do feel like we get a sense of like things have
Like a
happened in between.
timeline. I
Yeah,
mean,
when
that
we
makes sense. It does make sense, I guess.
But I don't disagree with the idea that they kind of just fell off, because I think it was supposed to imply that, oh, hey, now they're both awful, and that's where we're leaving them. It's like
Yeah,
there's
like
no
they're not going to
resolution.
ever. Yeah,
There's
you're
no
not going to change
there's,
their minds.
no, there's no resolution at that
Faye
point.
is gasping because Margaret Atwood is Canadian, not American.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
I would have had no clue. I haven't read anything by Margaret Atwood,
I
so I
actually didn't realize that. I was going based off of her accent, but you're right, Faye. My apologies.
so agreed. I don't think they ever planned to set anyone free. We never saw anyone freed other than the plant. That's exactly it. I don't think they intended. I don't think Thurwar was going to be free. I honestly don't even know if Thurwar made it out of the prison because we don't know. I don't know if they're going to let her go. I mean, I know we're getting towards the end of it, but I just don't. I have no faith in. I don't. I think they're liars. A big deal was made of it at the beginning, and it annoyed me so much to go further. And hey, Linda, I finished the book and enjoyed it. Yay. Can
Yay.
you give a rating? Do you give ratings, Linda? If so, let us know what your rating was. And Kraft was a rapist. Yes, but I wasn't sure if he was a rapist and then he murdered somebody. Oh,
He
maybe because
murdered
he
four
murdered the
people.
guy. Yes, he murdered
Murdered
also.
4 people and raped somebody.
Yeah, but is the reason he was in jail because he's a rapist and then he murdered in
No,
jail?
no.
No.
He
Okay.
murdered outside of jail and in jail and
In
raped
jail.
somebody.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, his full crime was actually never explained. We never got his backstory of like what he did. We just knew from what the as he called Angel Number
Lauren.
2 kept saying about him, Lawrence. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So they absolutely took away any humanity Kraft might have had. Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
and he didn't get any treatment. I think Kraft was suffering from mental illness. There's no telling if his crime like and this is where I do talk about this too. There's some ways this reminds me of Orange is the New Black, not the comedy part of it, but the seriousness because it is a comedy drama show
Yep.
is that a lot of things are not addressed about things that happen to people in life. There's a character in Orange is the New Black that is sent to prison because there is an accident. And she also is suffering from mental illness or whatever, but they don't
Yes.
take it as an accident. They assume that she was a murderer.
And I know who
And
you're talking
so
about.
yes, if you've seen the movie, I mean if you've seen the TV show,
Yeah.
um so we don't know if he was off his medication. We don't know. We just don't know. We don't know. I mean, it's so I think that's probably why I have empathy for him, not because of what he did, because I don't know the whole story, but because I think he would have had an opportunity if he would have gotten the medical care he needed. Or and his medicine, maybe. I mean, I don't know. I could be wrong. I think one of my comments was censored.
Oh, Faye, what are you saying?
Nasty. I was thinking something like being able to throw the hammer and have it returned to her like Thor with the possible magnets that was already in her wrists. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think they didn't want them to have anything but a you know why also? Because they treated these people like they were animals.
Yeah.
I mean, there were some aspects where they got treated nice, where they had a bed or they had nice food because they had a sponsor or whatever the case may be. But they put them in that arena and wanted them just to fight to the death kind of thing. So I think they wanted it to be as primitive as possible with them. That's my take on it. I don't know if you agree with that, Alex, or not. I said it didn't make sense to me to encourage violent people to get more and more violent. Maybe it was a critique of the prison system, but it happens behind prison doors and not in public.
Okay, I would be happy to talk about this too, Faye,
Yeah.
because I completely understand what you're saying, because I had multiple moments during the book when I would agree that there were certain things that the author didn't really explain well. It's like, yeah, how do you how do you become vindicated for your murder if you're encouraged to murder other people? I agree that I didn't think that that was a great message in the book, and I don't think that we got really any resolution in that. Again, it kind of goes back to this idea of like, well, Stax is trying to like show love to everybody, right? And it said at the beginning of the book that, you know, she's always presenting from a place of love. When she goes to kill somebody, she says, I love you know, things like that. It's like, yeah, but those two things they're at odds with each other.
Right. Well, I
Um,
almost wonder if the reason why they were doing the violence, having them do that is because they never anticipated them ever doing like getting out of prison. So I think them fighting one another was for the enjoyment of these people, and it was a way for them to make money off of it. Like, I'm
yeah,
bored, let me come up with something that we can do, and let's see how we can make money off of it. Let's see if people get excited about this. And lo and behold, they do.
yeah.
And
In a
that's
weird
the reality.
way, though, it in the book, because we see this with multiple characters, it's not just one. They actually become more and more disgusted by murder the more that they murder, right? And
Mhm.
obviously that's not everybody. Gunny Puddles doesn't feel that way. There are other people who don't feel that way, but you know, Thurwar feels that way. Stax doesn't want to kill anybody. We have the guy who was innocent, who had never actually committed murder and was falsely accused, and he went in and started fighting. And it's like, well, why would you if you weren't a murderer to begin with? And it's like, because prison was horrible for
Mhm.
him, right? And
Mhm.
he's like, that's his way, kind of like as a chance to get out, even though he's very likely to die because he never actually killed anybody. Um, and so I think, I guess the one thing that could make it make sense as to why violence begets violence is maybe if they were trying to get the people who committed these crimes to see the point of like why it's senseless, but that's not ever really addressed in the book either. So I don't know. That might be
Mhm.
something I need to think more about.
You've got some agreement with the reality TV, Alex, from Catherine and Jamie. All of the sponsors and trademarks and marketing make me want to throw up.
Yep,
It
yep.
took me forever to realize people weren't just drunk while discussing Star Trek characters. And wave tag like button. Hey, Jenna. I think the way the show was structured in the book was too basic to keep anyone's interest. It could work in real life, but not the way it was done here. I don't watch reality TV either. Yeah, I mean, maybe that's where it's the dystopian aspect comes in, perhaps. I mean, I can't imagine people. I mean, I know I shouldn't say that because I'm always surprised when I say I can't imagine that and then something happens.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
you know,
I unfortunately think anything is possible.
yeah,
I
I
really
guess so.
do.
Well,
I
and
don't.
also too, how do we know that things like this don't happen internally? You know what I'm saying?
Oh,
Like
I can guarantee you there have been guards that have bet on prisoners killing each other before. You know, I mean, guys, we had gladiatorial combat in ancient Rome.
well, that's
Like
what I
we
put on
yeah,
here. Yeah, that
like
was
this
one
is
of my things.
it's
It's like,
not
how is
completely absurd.
yeah, well, that's
So
what I said. It's a form of entertainment like gladiators back in the day. The other question was how is the reader also implicated in this? If we're complicit as a spectator, that was one of the questions with Emily and Will. How is the reader also implicated? And I answered the question with a question: are we the spectators in our current society? Honestly,
we always
I don't really think much about the prison system on a day-to-day basis unless something happens and I happen to see it. You know what I'm saying? Like, for example, when those 10 prisoners escaped from jail in New Orleans,
oh, yep. Mhm.
and those 10 prisoners were in jail for various reasons. They weren't all murderers.
Mhm.
So I know little about the prison system because I mean, it's very basic what I know about it. just because I don't know anyone, or if they have gone, it hasn't been for anything like murder.
And I'm very fortunate to be able to say the same thing, that I don't have any personal experience with people in my life being in prison. However, I did have a college professor that I studied under for multiple courses who was very passionate about the prison system, and he wanted to instill in us the injustice of the American prison system. So a lot
Mm-hmm.
of these things were things that I had already known, even if it wasn't that I might not have known a specific example with a specific person, but I knew
Right.
about atrocities that happen. I mean, the United States, not only do we incarcerate more people per capita than any other place in the world, but we don't rehabilitate anybody worth a damn, because we also have the highest recidivism rate. Our recidivism rate is, I think, if you put like state and federal together, is over 70% of people who end up, like, eventually when they get out of prison, they go back to prison. And it's a
Mm-hmm.
really sad reality because we don't give people any tools to be able to function in the outside world. So this was something I was thinking about when I was reading Chain Gang, is like, let's say that somebody were to get out and they weren't a plant, they were somebody who was in prison and they got out. What resources are they going to have available to them to
And
be
who's going
able
to hire
to,
them?
yeah, to be seen as a human being? Because there are people, especially with, I mean, social media we have today, there are people who have been in jail who go and they make accounts when they get out of jail and they talk about what it was like to be in prison. And they either were people who got out and they were okay, or they're people. I saw this one woman, and I was like heartbroken for her. She had gone to prison, she got out, her family didn't want to talk to her, she didn't have any friends, and she got out and she was devastated because she's like, I want to go back to prison so bad because I had a life there, I had structure there, I had friends there. And that sad reality is, if you don't tell people that they can have a life outside, if you don't tell them that they can be forgiven if they serve their time, they're going to end up going back. And then, yeah, then we think of people who are criminals as just like, well, oh, well, you're a terrible person, look at how many times you've been to prison. Well, what have we done to help them?
Right. Well,
And
I mean, that's another example from Orange is the New Black. Look at how many of those women got out and went back to the life that they had because they couldn't get hired for something else. They
yep,
weren't even respected, even when they were trying to be something else, or people used them because they were on the inside.
yep.
Um, so it's very sad that we're not trying to do anything to prevent people from going to jail, for one thing, but we're also not helping them when they do get on the outside, because then they have the scarlet letter on them, basically.
Especially
um
for petty crimes. I mean, if you went to jail because you shoplifted, I'm sorry, you don't deserve to be branded for the rest of your life because you made maybe a stupid mistake when you were a
well, it's
teenager.
true.
If you're a serial killer, that's different. You shouldn't be out on the street if
Right.
you're a serial killer, right?
Well,
But
and
there
also
are
too, it
people.
makes no sense, the sentencing to me. Like, you've got somebody that is like a murderer. They murdered a whole family, say, or they're a serial killer. Well, they shouldn't be in jail for the same amount that somebody that robbed a bank. I mean, I know robbing a bank is not good. I get that. But at the same time, why did the person rob the bank? What was their motivation? It wasn't to hurt anybody when they robbed the bank. They just needed the money for whatever XYZ thing. But they're put in jail. They didn't commit murder, but they're put in jail with a murderer. And they serve in a sentence that's like astronomical. It's like, that's where I have a problem. It's just, I think it needs to be a case by case situation,
Well, and we
honestly.
see that. We see that in Chain Gang. I mean,
Yes.
Stacked, if you're she is labeled a murderer for self-defense. Thurwar murdered her partner in cold blood.
Yes.
I mean, their crimes weren't equal. I mean, they obviously found love and they ended up, accepting each other as like being people. I mean, Sunset Harkless, they talk about him and like his crimes were unforgivable. His daughter didn't want him out on the street, but she also didn't want him to be on All Stars
Murdered.
either.
Yeah.
Yeah, she didn't feel like his crimes were deserving of that. And so it really comes down to like the punishment that somebody has needs to be equal to the crime.
Yes.
And this book is the epitome of that is not it. Like, this isn't it.
So Faye said that's why the Hunger Games works for me. They're not violent criminals. They're teenagers frightened for survival for a few days, controlled by the government forever after. Yeah. So I think that's where
There's more world building. There's way more world building in Hunger Games
Yes.
than there was in this
Yes.
movie.
And to me, it's not as close to reality. So I think that's part of it. I can't imagine it happening in real life as it does in Chain Gang. So it bugged me.
I
And
love
then
your faith in humanity, Faye, and I hope that you're right. I really do.
hangings were quite the spectator sport back in the day.
Yes,
That is
guillotine.
true.
Oh
The
my
guillotine,
God,
yes.
how many people came to watch Marie Antoinette get her head cut off?
Yes,
Like,
if you read in Cold Blood, the two murderers, and that's based on a true story.
is
They
that
were
one by
publicly
Capote?
hanged.
Is that
Yes,
Capote? Yeah. Okay.
yes. Or in front of our firing squad.
Yep.
This is just a gamification of executions. Yeah, well, you know what it
Absolutely.
is nobody made money off the hanging, Stina. This is somebody profiting.
And the government didn't have to be the ones to kill them. Like they let each other kill each other. So it's like, oh well, we didn't do it. We just gave them the option.
Hello, Ragnar. I'm glad you like books. Um, let's see. I think we're getting a little something something there. We're talking about Chain Gang All Stars by Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah. Did I say it right?
Yeah, Adjei-Brenyah. Yep.
It sounds like Survivor Island MMA meets Roman collusion. The dehumanization of warriors types of entertainment has been around for thousands of years for a reason. Yeah, I mean, I thought about the gladiators. That was pure entertainment, for them. And then Mama Maggie's trying to explain that chain gang was used for prisoner work groups for centuries because they are free labor.
Yes. Yep.
And then another thing that would have made it a lot more interesting and realistic is if the winner didn't usually walk out without a scratch and got things like biomechanical limb replacements.
So you wanted it to be more sci-fi, Zach. I mean, that's what I'm
Mhm.
hearing from what you wanted is like more sci-fi weapons, cyborg type people.
Mm-hmm.
3 out of 5. Okay.
3 out of 5. That's fair. That's where I have started off. I don't know if I'm going to change that or not. Having them physically and mentally lose their humanity throughout. Um, and then Keaton is saying not necessarily was a system for convict labor often used in the South and penal colonies.
Mm-hmm.
Liz says, I wonder if the footnotes are a way to ground the story and differentiate it from the Running Man, since there is a lot of thematic overlap between the two. That's interesting.
I need to read The Running Man.
I haven't read it. I watched it many, many moons ago.
Is that one
Um,
with Schwarzenegger? I know it's a Stephen King
yes,
book.
it's
Yeah.
Schwarzenegger is in the original, but I do think I want to say they might have remade it. I'm not 100% sure. I'm having to go through here. Let's see. There were tons of white, Hispanic, and Native men in the chain gangs, not just African Americans. And then it was based on the prison population, so all races appeared in the images. Our current oppressive government has YouTube removing a lot of comments. Okay, let's see. Let's do that. I think we had a little troll in our comments.
They were asking what jail we were ripping, Kat. I was like,
Well, that's why I was going
you
through the
completely
comments
missed. Yeah,
trying to
it's like,
see, and then I'm like, these are
dude,
kind of
you missed the
weird.
point of what a book club is. But thanks for stopping by.
Yeah, I think we had a little troll in our comments here. I've seen him before. I don't know if I
Oh,
saw
you
him in
have?
your sprints or
No, it wasn't
somebody's
mine.
sprints.
It wasn't mine.
Somebody recently, not in mine, but so let's see. Please keep it about the book. We are in a discussion. I love it. So Faye was saying gladiators were prisoners of war and or slaves, not murderers.
That is
Okay.
true.
I did
That is
not know
true.
that. I did not know
Yeah.
that.
I think we
Um,
were more focusing on the fact that death could be turned into a spectator sport,
yeah.
right? So it's not necessarily who were the people doing it. because that can always change, but it's the fact that it could happen.
And Mama Maggie said, I lived near Huntsville State Prison in Texas for most of my childhood. They had a version of a Western rodeo that raised a lot of money for the prison and inmates' families. The rodeo kept violence down because the prisoners didn't want to give up their work crew time with the farm. They at Angola, our prison here in Louisiana, they have a yearly rodeo as well. And that we went one year because a family invited us to go, and Barry was little. He might have been like pre-K kindergarten. And the saddest thing about attending the rodeo was to see the children of the prisoners go to see
Uh,
their fathers in the
oh,
jail. Like that broke my heart, because I think they forget about these people have families, they have children, they have moms and dads, and whatever their poor choices that they make, they get separated from them for that. So Mama Maggie says, I have a plot of a book created titled Orange is the New IRA because prison life offers better care than our country's senior care services.
if that's the case, then that terrifies me about senior care because
Yeah, I
prison
was
care
gonna
is
say
terrible.
anybody that has a wrench can turn
I
people off.
well, so here's the thing is I have a friend who worked as a she was a X-ray tech and she worked for a prison. And she
Mhm,
talked to me regularly about the medical care that they received, and it was atrocious. I mean, people in there dying of cancer who like had broken ribs and stab wounds and everything, and they would take forever to get to them because like, well, one, there was limited doctors, right? But
mhm,
two is because, oh well, they're inmates, so like we don't really care if they're in pain as badly,
mhm.
or if they're like literally going to die. And so if that's the case, I don't want to know. I don't want to live to be old then, because then my
Yes,
life is going to be terrible.
yes, that would be awful. So another question, getting back to the idea of the chain gang being murderers, what do you think about the idea of villains and heroes in chain gang when all of them are murderers?
So this was something that I thought was really interesting in the book was the fact that like so everybody's a murderer. Everybody's serving at least 20 years because you have to be doing that in order to even be a link. And so you have all these people that have committed heinous crimes, you could say the worst crime that a person could commit, right? But you create like in wrestling culture, you have like the heroes and the heels, right? And it's like, well, how do you decide that somebody is a bad person? Is it because of how likable they are? Because in this book, it seemed to be like the more personality that you had, the more that you kind of played into it, the more that you got audiences to like you. I mean, even Melancholia Bishop was like, hey, get them to like you. It'll benefit you in the end. We learn that from the very beginning of the book. And you get more resources, you get more sponsorships, you get better food, you get better sleeping accommodations. It's almost gamified for them in that way too.
Well, that's what
Um,
I put about the wrestling. You have the it because I thought this was a good question. I think if you're a spectator, you might have that mindset of villains and heroes because
yeah,
of wrestling or the Marvel movies. And I think the idea is there is to entice the spectators and keep them watching. So it's like
yep,
entertainment purposes for that. And I like on
yes,
page 242 when Gunny Puddles says, and this is what you were alluding to earlier, he says, they were talking about, I think they were talking about being, this must have been when they were being interviewed or on the panel. And Gunny Puddle says, I know what I am and what everybody at this table is. We ain't no saints or whatever the people hollering outside think we is. I'm here to eat and get mine, and that's it. But for now, Her Majesty makes the rules.
yep. That was
And so
during
that
the
was a dig, at them, for that. But he knows he's just saying at the end of the day what like Faye is thinking about. At the end of the day, these are all murderers. And it shouldn't be glorified, and we shouldn't have games that are supporting it.
right.
And so it's kind of hard to invest when you don't condone that kind of behavior,
Yeah,
which we
it
don't.
becomes like your sports team, like rah rah go team Third War, right? And
Yeah.
you just want them to win at all costs. And then you feel like you are supporting them even though
Mhm.
they are a murderer. You feel like, no, I really like I we when they are at the market and they're working for those people and every single one of them is like, we support you. We support you for everything that you represent. And it's like, but you're also terrified of them standing next to you because they're a murderer and you're
Mhm.
afraid of them. So like, do you support them? It's I think it was it say I or Sai I who was saying, oh, like, so you want me to be freed, you're gonna help me get out of here, and they're like, no, no, we're not saying that, we just,
Right,
we
right.
like what you're doing, we support your gender and everything. And it's like there was that very hard line of like, oh well, we like you as far as you're in the games, but God, we don't want you anywhere near us out here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So
yeah.
then it was very hypocritical.
Right.
So Keaton says, I think about the librarian from Shawshank Redemption. He kept offending because prison was more familiar than the outside. Once he was paroled, he can't comprehend how the world has moved on. Yeah,
I've
because you think
never
about
seen
people that go in prison and they're in there for decades,
yeah.
and then they come out and so much has changed. In Colorado, they're revoking minor cannabis
Cannabis.
convictions because it's now legal, and under today's laws, those people wouldn't be arrested.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And how
yeah,
long have they been in jail for something that now nobody would go
exactly.
to jail for? It's so sad.
And my favorite aunt went to prison for popping her abusive husband's balloon. I saw the husband part. I don't think she should have. Yeah, I agree. I
Well,
mean,
no, I don't. I don't think that she should have murdered somebody.
no,
I
I
I would
don't think,
agree.
yeah, but I think there's a reason, like, that would have been considered self-defense, I guess, if he was abusing her, but she would have had to still have consequences of some kind.
Yeah.
And then you wonder, what did it take? Did she do things prior to leading up to it that she was failed? That was her only recourse? That's what's sad also. It's like if you don't have anybody helping you on the outside. Yes, I thought a lot about Shawshank while reading this. And then it's like the Shawshank Redemption. It was Tony or Tommy that was sent to prison for life because he robbed a store that sold stamps, which meant it counted as a post office government office. I keep accidentally doing the thumbs up. I'm not saying it's a thumbs up comment. Sorry. I thought of The Running Man too. The Running Man movie is like this, but the book has almost nothing to do with it. They are extremely different, talking about the Schwarzenegger version. Say yes, we did. My brother said this book reminded him of The Running Man too. I do agree about the spectator sport, just not the premise of this book. And The Running Man and Thunderdome both. Two men enter, one man leaves.
I
Yeah,
need
like
to see
Mad
the
Max.
Thunderdome. I need to see that.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
did think about Mad Max.
I was
Uh,
talking with Keaton actually about that while reading this. I didn't really relate, like, put the two together, but now that you say that, it's like, oh, yeah, I guess they would be.
this book is very similar to the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, but the book has a completely different story. And when I worked at the SO, all of us records techs had a deputy picked out to assault if we got a catastrophic illness. Wait, what? I don't understand that. Do you understand that, Alex?
Are you saying that like you would have gotten better care, like health care, if you had been in prison? So it's like, oh, if you, it's like, yeah, you can't afford to get your medical care. It's like somehow go to prison. I think
Uh,
that's what I'm getting out of that.
okay,
Let
okay.
me know if I'm not getting that.
They didn't all start out as murderers when they entered prison, but somehow the choice to kill or be killed was more palatable than staying in prison. Yeah. And it is definitely closer to the movie, but there's an overlap with the book as well. Desperate fighters profiting from violence, desensitized TV audience. Yeah, I do think that it I do think like people being in the arena physically in person watching, it's like I don't know how they can separate it. With TV, I can understand it because you've got so much unbelievable make-believe stuff on television, I could see how people might not think that they're real people, but I don't see how they can do that when they're physically there. That
Maybe
was another.
TV's how they start. Maybe that's kind of like the thing that gets them hooked. And then by the time they get to watching it live, it's like, oh, now I'm so used to watching them on TV kill each other that in person it's not that different. I don't know. They talked about how the feeling in the arena was very animated. Excuse me, it was very electric. And so like it's a lot easier to be in a crowd mentality when everybody around you is also buzzing with that energy, right? So
Mhm,
if
mhm.
anything, it might be the opposite. Maybe being in person, it makes it even easier to indoctrinate people because if you're there and everybody else is happy, then you have a pass at that point to be excited about it too.
That's true. Yeah, I don't know. I cannot even, like, to me, it's so, like, I couldn't condone it. I just couldn't
No, and
condone
and
it.
and I know, and I'm not saying this because I'm like some saint, because I'm not, but I know that of the characters in this book, if something like this were to ever truly become a reality show, I would not be one of the people who would support it, right? Like very easily
Mhm,
would be one of the people who would rally against that. So and I mean, there's a reason why we don't have gladiatorial combat anymore. There's a reason why we don't have public executions anymore. It's like it's because as a society we realize that it's grotesque. We realize that it's in bad taste. We realize that it's unjust. And
mhm,
so this book is kind of like if society were to if society were to go in reverse, right? If we were to start kind of looking back, because you could say history repeats itself, right? In one form or another, that, maybe there would be a time, maybe not during our lifetimes, maybe not in the next few generations, but you never know. Maybe there could be
mhm.
something like this that would come back around in one way or another.
Yeah, which is scary to me. So, what did you think about Mari's interaction with the reporter? Did the book change your perspectives at all on the prison system?
I wouldn't say that it changed my perspective on the prison system. One of the things that I guess the main thing that I want to talk about from the conversation with the reporter is the big thing that irked me of like something that was an inconsistency that didn't make sense. Okay. And so,
Mhm,
and then it really, again, it plays into this idea that the people who are watching are assuming that these people are never actually going to make it out alive. So, I mean, I
mhm.
guess we can look at it from that perspective. But one of the things that the reporter says to Mari is like,
Yeah.
so you want these people to be freed. You want them to be walking around outside because Mari is an abolitionist, not only in the sense of the games, but she wants a reform of the prison system overall. And Mari never said in the book that she believed that people who committed murder should just be walking around on the street. That wasn't the point. The point was that this was cruel and unusual and something that anybody, if you take the time to actually look at it and see it for what it is, are going to see that this is inhumane, right? And so the
Right.
reporter is replying like, well, my sister was murdered and she never got a chance at her life. And you're telling me that you want these people that we're watching fight in here to, be walking around freed out in the world. And what was so weird about that comment to me is the fact that these people, because all of them are serving very long sentences, okay, they're being given the chance to make it out in 3 years if they can just survive. So actually,
Mhm.
if you didn't support the games, you would be supporting them being in prison longer because they're going to be in there for their full sentence. This woman's like, "Well, what, you want them to be walking around on the street?" It's like you're the one giving them the opportunity to potentially get out in 3 years. And what if they're the worst, most brutal motherfucker that you've ever seen? And you're going to give them that opportunity where previously they could have just been rotting away in prison.
Right.
So that to me was a very strange argument. Is like if there wasn't the time frame of like 3 years, maybe that comment would have made sense. But I don't think that that made sense from the reporter otherwise,
Well, I think
unless
the
you're assuming they're not going to
reporter,
make it out ever,
yeah,
right?
well, the reporter just doesn't want them to be out at all, and she's trying to make it out And there's a part in here where she says that it's a tough situation, or Mary says that that's the argument. I can't find. I mean, I have it all like tabbed, but I didn't tab that one particular thing.
You're looking for the conversation with the
Yeah, I mean,
reporter.
I have all that tabbed.
I'm trying to
Uh,
remember. Sorry, I don't remember what chapter that is. Eee.
yeah, it's the chapter called Interview towards it. I mean, it's two.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Right. Interview.
But what I'm saying is there was a part where Mary says that it's a debate, something about it being a debate, that is the debate about it is, we don't want people out and freed. But the whole point of what Mary is fighting for is just better treatment of prisoners in the prison
Prison.
system.
Yes,
She's
agreed.
not saying that she wants people to be free and out on the street,
Yeah.
but she wants them to be treated better than they're being treated. She's
Yeah.
fighting for them to not be in the arena killing
Yeah.
each other, to get
Exactly.
out for their freedom or whatever.
Right.
So,
But the
uh,
interviewer wasn't taking it that way. That was the thing about it is they weren't able to meet. They weren't understanding each other, and Mari didn't really know what to say to her after. It was like, well, what about my sister? What do you have to say about that? And Mari is just kind of stunned and is like, well, I'm sorry about your sister. And the interviewer is like, well, sorry, all you have to offer me, that's not going to bring her back. As if the interviewer was taking it very personally, that
yeah,
like somebody who is fighting for the rights of inmates is actively saying that like I don't know. It's like this argument of like, well, she was offended at the idea of them being treated like people because her sister wasn't around to be able to be a person herself, right?
right,
And I suppose there are people who feel that way. And I going back to what we said earlier, Adjei-Brenyah would have probably done better to have more perspectives like that of people who like had their loved ones had been murdered and they're watching the games, because I think that would have made that interviewer's perspective make more sense. I just don't think
I
that
think
it,
so
it just
too.
kind of fell in there and that
Right.
was it.
And that's why I didn't really kind of remember it. And that's why I'm like, I think we need to have perspective of not just people who are, like either for the games or against the games, like the spectators and all that, but people who have actually been touched by the violence
Yeah.
and wanting to keep those people in prison. And she even makes the comment, and what about the jobs changing all stars in the prisons? um, you hate so much create? Have you
Oh, I
considered those positive
despise.
aspects of our carceral system? And
Oh,
here Mari smiled weakly in automatic response to an absurd idea that this was about employment, or that employment might justify these deaths. The woman's face snapped from sinister but inviting warmth to a slate of cool anger. And she thinks, and she says, is that funny to you? And it's not so much, it's not that Maori is saying people are going to lose their jobs in prison and that people shouldn't deserve to be in prison for their crimes and have consequences. She's just saying it shouldn't be done this way. And I think
no.
that's what the reporter is like missing out on, is that you're defending this brutal thing because your sister was murdered and you think murderers deserve to be murdered or whatever. So her argument wasn't, I think, like you said, it was more personal, you
It
know?
did. It came from a personal place, and Mari. There was so much that could have been said in that interview, and I think what was kind of implied is, Mari had this script, right? Like she had thought about what it was that she wanted to say, and when she was hit with some of these tough questions, she kind of froze up a little bit, and there were things that she could have said. So, like for example, she has a family member who has a job being their driver, like
Mm,
for the Aham team, like he drives them around, right? Like he would lose his job if like
mhm.
these games stopped. That doesn't mean he couldn't get a different job, Like the creation of these jobs, like they're minimal. The main entertainment and the main jobs are the criminals themselves, and they're not being paid. They've
Right.
actually had more of their rights stripped from them because they have no sense of privacy, in addition to the fact that they have to murder people. So
Exactly.
they're free labor.
Hmm.
You know, which again, going back to the idea of a chain gang, what they're
Yeah,
free labor in the sense that instead of, you know, doing physical labor, they're free entertainment.
exactly.
So there really aren't jobs to be lost there.
So Mama Maggie said, I think they're saying that since they're going to die anyway, why not take out one of the crueler guards on the way down? Many probably felt pressure to watch because everyone else was watching and don't want to be singled out. Yeah, I mean, we have that whole situation where Will is like having a water cooler moment with that girl, at his office or whatever, the
Oh,
coworker,
yeah.
so it's like, and to be fair, the vast majority of the cops I worked with were true professionals. Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
that's another thing we have to say too, is that not all policemen are bad policemen. I think part of what the issue, and my Andrew and I talk about it, is that I think policemen need to have more training and have to be trained with what issues are happening in our society today. You know what I'm saying? They're
Like a
not.
sensitivity training or
Yes,
something like
because not
that?
only
Yeah.
that, I don't think it, and I'm only saying this from a teacher's perspective, like we would have children come into our classrooms that would need special accommodations, say.
Mm.
And if the school did not provide that kind of a classroom, they're put in a general classroom, that's fine. But if you have a teacher that's not trained in that, how is that benefiting the child? It's the same thing with a police officer. If they're not trained in how to handle someone that has mental illness and they don't recognize that this person could be schizophrenic or something like that, and they decide to draw a weapon on them, and that person ends up dying as a result of that, that's a problem,
Mhm.
and then that police officer is then labeled, and then it's a big thing, and it's, I think it's because they need more training. I mean, I don't know if anybody agrees with that or not. I just think that,
I think training and vetting of personalities is important. I mean, like you can tell a lot from a person when you hire them about like
mhm,
their level of cruelty or like whether they're a sympathetic person, right? Like we need to hire, you have to have people obviously who can handle a tough job, but you also have to have
yeah,
people who have a lot of compassion. And if the only people that you can get are people who are, you can tell they're itching for a fight,
like
they're
they're
not people.
bullies.
Yeah, they're not the people who should be police. And a lot of our police are people that are like that.
But I also
And
do think it's also a pay issue too. I mean, if you're not willing to pay your people in positions for them to handle that kind of stuff, or that they're not overworked because you want to have a lean police force, or you want to have a lean, I mean, it's the same thing that's happening in our medical field. I mean, you don't have as many nurses on staff as you used to. Well,
emergency services is a traumatic job.
that becomes a liability,
Yeah,
kind of
it's
thing. I
it's
mean,
very traumatic. People have to be paid for the trauma that they are expected to endure in their role.
so the author also touched on the percent of innocent people in prison. I forget the character's name, but one of the links with their war and Stacks was innocent.
It
Yeah.
was Bad Water.
Hmm.
I think Bad Water was the one.
Television offers this level of disconnect and detachment that it creates a psychological block against humans harming humans.
I mean, people used to watch everybody remember the show Cops? Cops was not an ever favorable for the people who were getting arrested,
Right.
right? It's like it was, you look at those people and you're like, oh, look at that idiot. You know what I mean? It's yeah, it's easy to disconnect
Yeah.
and say like, well, that person did something bad. Look at how terrible they are. Now you're on TV, sucker.
Now you're humiliated even
Yeah.
more.
Yes. Yeah.
So Mama Maggie says, my daughter had a friend who liked violent movies and games and he wanted to be a Marine, but when he went to Afghanistan and actually got splattered with his buddy's blood, he freaked out. And when he got sent home, he told her that he had never felt like they were shooting at and killing real people until his buddy bled out and died next to him. He washed his face to the point he was scrubbing his skin raw with ice cold water, trying to stop the feeling of warm blood on his skin. That's so
That
sad.
is very terrible PTSD. I'm sorry
Yeah,
to hear
and I
that.
don't and her favorite quote is, "I don't fear monsters or demons, I fear what real people do to real people." And I think
Yep.
that's one of the things that what is, I like to read post-apocalyptic stories because it's what would happen in situations like that when people don't remember that they're human beings, and the
Mhm.
humans are what is more scary about the situation than the apocalypse, honestly. Because I think they think at that point, it's just me out for myself.
I thought The Stand was like that. I actually didn't find like the great, devil evil, the really horrible part of that story. I thought it was all the humans that
Mhm. Yeah, that's the
in the
the thing with
yeah.
zombies. It's not the zombies. I mean, yeah, they're cool and they're cool creatures and monsters or whatever and kinda gross, but at the end of the day, it's the people, the characters. How are they gonna survive this? And it's the other people that they have to deal with that's scary. I don't know, I've never felt that desensitized despite consuming violent media. To me, the real danger is the commodization, commercialization of actual violence, not, say, play in Mortal Kombat.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I know it. It's because Keaton and I play video games. Like if I go
Mhm.
and I am playing a fantasy video game where I have to kill a bad guy, I'm not inherently more violent. It's happening in a video game, is what he's saying.
And Faye is saying lots of people do have trouble distinguishing between reality and fantasy.
That is true, though. Yeah, some people do.
I don't think it's the violence itself when considering fictional media as part of the problem. It's the commercialization of real violence as entertainment. It's always felt like an intellectually lazy argument when the true danger lies in the perpetuation of actual violence for the entertainment of others.
I'll go off of that too, where I personally think that if I became a fan of, we were talking about cage fighting earlier,
Mhm.
I think I would be more, I like it would be a greater impression on me as a person and my understanding of violence and using violence as a tool if I was a fan of cage fighting than playing a video game where I know I'm fighting a fictional character.
Mhm.
And so I would have to agree with Keaton on that one.
Mhm. And Jamie says they are protesting for better treatment and against being used for profit. Yes.
Yes.
Talking
Yep.
about Mary. But I'm coming from a very anti-Joseph Lieberman standpoint. And Jamie is agreeing with Faye. It's very much a truism that sounds great until we examine it further. And Mama Maggie says yes. Sadly, in many places, violent criminals have more rights than victims' families. And yes, training and vetting. Training is so important, but also is adequate staff. That's my main thing too.
Yeah.
But also putting people in situations, and I just use teaching because that's what I know. I just know that there are, I mean, I saw it this year with one of the teachers. She was so out of her depth. I mean, I had 10 of her students in Title One, and the three other students that weren't in Title One were being, serviced by SPED, and one of them, was autistic, and she was so out of her depth, she could not handle, what she was given. So it's very sad when you think, it's in every occupation, I guess is what I'm trying to say, but we put people in situations all the time and they're not prepared for it. They're not trained and they're not getting paid and they have lean staff. And when you have all of that together, you're going to have people that, or if they've never had a situation like that and they're alone and they have to make this decision, it's like it just ends badly. You know, everyone knew that the best academy grads went to our agency in New Mexico, and then they got sorted down to the agency that hired the dregs. I left geriatric nursing to work in a pharmacy than to work for the post office because delivering mail was less stress.
I don't blame you there.
And cops
No.
was like people of Walmart means meets.
I don't know what
I
FAFO
don't know
is.
what FAF is. Cage fighting makes me sick.
Me too. Yeah.
The whole trope in the zombie apocalypse is that people are the real monsters, and that started with the Frankenstein's monster. The doctor was the real monster, and that is so true. So we do have a couple of questions, and one of them I think is the one of the important ones. Is, and I had a question that kind of went with this one. It's, why do you think Stax made her choice at the end when it came down to her or Thurwar? Who did you think would win?
Yay. Okay. So I was actually really torn about this one. In that last chapter, I actually had to take a break right before I read it because I was feeling so much anxiety about what was going to happen, which is a good sign. I mean, I'm glad that I was anxious for what was going to happen in the end. Um, I think that it made sense that Thurwar was the one to get out. So Stax made her decision, I think, for a couple reasons. One is, I think that because she was that person that always led with love, Thurwar was always the colder one. She felt love deeply, but Stax was always the one that publicly led with love. One reason I think it made sense for her to sacrifice herself is because if she made the ultimate sacrifice and everybody saw that she did it willingly, because everybody would see that she pulled her blow, like she didn't kill Thorborg when she had the chance, that would be an impactful moment. So that's one
Mm-hmm.
thing. She led
Mm-hmm.
with love. But the other thing is, if Stax were to have won that battle, she would still be fighting in the arenas, and they could have found an opponent for her later on that maybe would have killed her, and she never would have been able to realize her goal, her potential,
Mm-hmm.
right, of going out and, allying with these people who were trying to make a change and make a difference. So she knew that the only real way that they could guarantee that was going to happen is if Thurwar became the first High Freed to make it
Mm-hmm.
there herself. And so she had to make that sacrifice because something could have happened to her, but she knew that if Thurwar won, that Thurwar would go on and do the work that Stax would have done herself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't think about Stax having to continue fighting after that. I'm glad you brought that up because I didn't realize that.
Yeah, there was a lot of layers. Like that book ended, I read the last two paragraphs like twice because I just couldn't.
It
It was a
it
lot.
was very impactful to me. Like literally, I had like liquid came out of my eyeballs. I mean, like pouring it out of my eyeballs, and just like, because the way I felt about it is that they both achieve freedom. They both achieve freedom, and even if, and I just knew that they weren't going to be together. They
No,
weren't ever going to be together on the outside, and
no.
they weren't going to be able to be together anymore on the inside. So that made me sad because I thought that they were really good for one another. Um, Also, I think that Stax chose low freedom as an act of mercy because she helped Sunset. He needed mercy and help because he didn't want to continue. And now she was going to help Thurwar by sacrificing herself. I don't know. I could be wrong. And then I honestly thought Stax would win because Thurwar would sacrifice herself. I thought that. I really did think that. She was going to sacrifice herself. And the only reason I say that is on page 205.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Thurwar says that she's not going to kill her.
Yeah, she says there would be freed soon. They'd made so much love and so much death together. There's always no one on the planet who could be her match the way Loretta Thurwar was. She thought this was, oh, no, no, that's the wrong thing. Wait. Where am I at? I have 205. Shoot. Okay, I don't know why I tabbed that.
It's okay. I know what you're talking
I
about. It
have
was with Thurwar
205
was
on
having her
there.
inner monologue, and she was talking about how she had made the decision that she didn't want to kill Stax, but later on they kind of made the agreement that they both had to fight. Like they
Okay,
had
that's
to.
okay.
Yeah.
Soon Thurwar would be free, and soon Stax would be a colossal. Life was death and rebirth, death and rebirth. Stax was not the same person she had been before the night she had killed Sunset. and
Hmm.
she was still learning this new self. So it was sort of like she was going to go that route, and then Thurwar felt she deserved to die for what she had did to Vanessa, even though she was not the same person.
Yep.
And so that's why I thought perhaps Thurwar was going to sacrifice herself for Stax, even though she didn't feel worthy to go. But then Stax went ahead and did what she did, and I was like, man,
Yeah, I
I
really
had to be a mercy.
it hurt. It hurt, and I really do believe that she did it because Thurwar like then became the first high freed to make it on her own. And everybody would have to contend with that now that there was somebody who really did make it on the outside of their own, you know, volition and not because they got helped out by the game masters.
Yeah,
So that
yeah.
that was what was so impactful for me, and the way that it left off, and the fact that the book cut off right there. Because I see some comments coming through talking about like, why wasn't there one more chapter? And I'm like, I think the point was it was to leave everybody in shock and awe that that this was the new reality, that it had finally happened.
Well,
And
and also they were going to have to think about what to do next because no one had ever gotten out of it. And that leads to the
right,
question I had. How would you characterize the novel's ending and the freedom that Thurwar and Stax reach at the end? Triumphant, mournful, a little bit of both. I said mournful because I felt like both of the women lose. Although, because we don't know if Thorwar actually gets her freedom. That's the thing. Like there's a part of me that is not hopeful that they're going to allow Thorwar to walk out of this prison, that something's going to happen to her, like
they
she's going to have
cheated.
to go on a march, or something's going to happen, or somebody's going to take her out somewhere when she's by herself and there's no little cameras following or whatever. I don't trust the power. That's the thing. I don't trust the power, and I don't think they have any intention of letting the them to get their freedom. I think it's just all a ploy to keep them going, going, going. I don't think what they counted on is the fact that Thurwar and Stax actually love each other, and they want to do something to stop this by
Yep.
one of them getting out. And Stax knows that Thurwar probably will be the one that will be able to carry it out.
Yes. Yeah. And
I don't know.
I do think that the people who created the games probably didn't think that anybody would make it because they would always make it sufficiently difficult. But I don't. My interpretation of the end was maybe a little bit more hopeful in the sense that I do believe that they awarded it to her because the fans would have been outraged if the rules had been broken, because the
Mm.
fans were shocked when even Mickey, this bastard who's been the announcer this whole time. I've cursed a lot during this sprint. I'm sorry, but uh, he even is sick at the rules, and they fired him because he didn't want to make the announcement. Like he wasn't happy about it, and so like
Mhm.
things were changing, and I think people would have there would have been a riot of some kind if they hadn't allowed her freedom. So I think that she made it out.
Yeah, that's the thing. Will she really be free, or will they throw Hunger Games where she'll still be under the thumb of the game masters? Maybe the next book will cover that. Yeah, because I mean, the thing about it is, I never thought about that, where she would be the face of it, and then she would have to go promote it, and who's to say,
She
that.
wouldn't at that point, though. So, because she said that she was going to join the cause of the abolitionists, that was what she was going to go do. Her and Stax had talked about that. So she at that point is not no longer contractually obligated for the games. It was only so long as she was participating in the games.
Oh, you're getting bragged on. Yeah, I understood what you were saying, Stina. Yeah. And then don't mind cussing if you're not using the other word, every other word.
Oh, no, I don't do that. It's for emphasis. It's
Yes.
emphasis.
Well, the thing about it is, what I'm saying is, if they would have allowed that, was there anything in the contract that they signed that said if you get out now you have to be the face of whatever? You know, I mean, what if they wouldn't have given her freedom to actually go out and live in the world?
I well, based off of the contract that got read out to her, it didn't seem to imply that they were bound for their whole life. It was only for the 3 years. So I think it's like going to prison. Like you are there and you serve your time and you get out and you have all this freedom. That doesn't mean the third war would know what to do with herself,
Right,
right?
right.
Because
But
we
I
don't
do
see that
think
part.
right. Well, that's true, but I do think Mary probably would reach out. Well, no, because
Oh
Mary,
yeah,
yeah, I mean,
yeah.
Mary had the issue though,
She was
when she
still part of
married.
the resistance. But she was changed. Maybe actually her and Thorwar could have become friends because Thorwar had been influenced too. Maybe she would
Mhm.
have been able to help her through that. I don't know.
Jamie's got a good point here. I think that's why they changed the rules. They thought Stax was the one to take their war out. By the time Stax could have made to 3 years, they would have found someone else to take her
And
out.
that's what I'm saying is like she
Yeah.
if she would have had to keep fighting, she would have known that they would have found somebody to fight her that could have killed her and then nobody would ever have been freed. So the only option was for her to sacrifice herself so that their work could get out.
Yeah. And Eleanor agrees with Alex. Fans would riot if their war denied her freedom. If their war, yeah, was denied her freedom. I agree. So I want to mention that I've been up for 36 hours and didn't do great explaining my points or issues. You did fine, Zach. You
You
did
should
fine.
go take a nap, Zach. Go to sleep. Goodness.
Okay, so then I did have one other question, and I don't know if we kind of talked about it. I mean, we talked about Simon a little bit, and that was basically the story of Simon J. Kraft is told through a fragmented narrative style. How is this literary choice used to illuminate the impact of solitary confinement on the mind? I thought the author made a good choice with that myself.
Yeah, I
Um,
think he did a great job with it, and also including the statistics. It was solitary confinement for me is possibly the cruelest punishment that you can get because that is the one thing where you will truly lose your humanity. Because like even if in prison, if they were to beat you, they were to hurt you, they were to like I don't know, use your friends against you. There is something so different about being isolated and not being allowed to talk to another person. Like when he's in there and he's like, "Yeah, I'm in the hole for 23 hours a day, and the 1 hour that I'm out, the light hurts me so bad. All I'm wanting is to go back into the darkness." It's like
mhm,
he was like craving the solitude because to be out became so loud and so overstimulating and like how sad
mhm.
that really is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was awful.
Yeah, I thought the narration for Kraft was amazing too. I think the way he was portrayed is what drew me to him as a character. I
Mhm.
just, I think I had the most empathy for him.
I
Um,
think he was the most compelling character in the story, in
mhm,
my opinion. Him and I really liked Hendrix.
mhm,
I liked Hendrix a lot too.
mhm,
I liked it because you get to see the new experiment prison that he's in where they all have to be silent and like what
mm,
he does when he can finally speak and like the way that he lost his arm and how he has to like adapt with that. And he's also the one where you get to see how you find out what your weapon is because that was something I wondered from the beginning is like how do these people get their weapons? Do they pick them? Like why do they pick these random things? And then you realize it's like a game show wheel where the guy who gets the spoon, and another
yes,
one who
I
gets the
know. I'm just
scissors,
like
and
this
I
poor
was
girl.
like, "Oh my god, that's
Well,
even
and then
worse."
here is me. I'm thinking, well, you probably could do some damage with a spoon if the person. I mean, I was kind of thinking
Get their eyeball.
it's a stupid weapon. But if you think about it, if you turn it around, you have a sharp end. I mean, you could shove that in somebody's eye or in
Yeah,
their ear or
take
their
their
temple or
eyeball out.
whatever. I was just thinking, I mean, it is a dumb tool. And because not only that, you'd have to get up close to whoever it was. So I don't know. I think in the right hands, the spoon could work. But if you are a person that, like, what am I going to do with the spoon?
Mhm.
You know?
Mm.
I just thought that was sort of like, you're already in a bad situation, and then you're just gonna make it worse by giving you this especially if it
Yeah.
was like a plastic spoon. Could you imagine? Ugh,
And Kraft got the, like, weird Wolverine claw
I
things, and it's like,
know.
man, he spun him and Hendrix both spun well, apparently.
Mhm.
So,
It's not just the isolation for people, it's the overstimulation after being completely sensory deprived for such long periods.
yep.
And that was the most impactful part for me after reading those chapters. I took breaks from reading. Yeah.
Yes.
And the
Yeah.
other problem with solitary is a thing called time stretching, where it seems like it is a lot longer than it is.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah,
That
so
was also a great part for the audiobook was Hendrix's singing. Yes.
oh, sings?
Yes,
He
he
actually
sings.
sings it?
You actually get to hear it. Yeah,
Oh,
I
that would have
agree.
been okay, that would have been something I would have appreciated hearing, even though I don't listen to audiobooks, that would have been great.
Yeah, I mean, even if you could get the audiobook and you could like you can move the audiobook to those parts, if you could get the audiobook through your library just to hear that part, I think you would have. And also too, it was the way the frantic, way that Kraft was talking at moments or whatever.
Um,
You got that, because you had different actors doing or different
oh, it
narrators,
was different
voices.
narrators.
Yeah.
Nice,
Some
okay.
of them had the same one, and Jamie said, "Yeah, Spork." That would have been terrible. Okay, so my last question, I think we got to all of yours, Alex. The last question I had was, oh, well, we might have already answered this. Yeah, I think we did. It was just about the footnotes. That
Oh,
combined
yeah.
with your footnotes. So
Mhm.
yeah, that would be the only thing. The reason I don't know if anybody read the acknowledgments, but he put those statistics and real life stories in there because the book was possible because of so many thinkers, activists, writers, and advocates who helped grow his point of view and guide research that deepened his understanding of the carceral world and the country. So I do think that the footnotes did add realism to the story, and that's why it felt like it was more nonfiction.
Mhm.
Like, and then just the closeness. It didn't feel like a dystopian novel to me. But yeah.
We know about what to pick for the future cat. Maybe I mean, I will say we've been talking for well over 2 hours, and we're good at
I
that,
don't
right?
even know. I
We
can't.
talk. Yeah, but, I mean, this book really does make for a great discussion piece,
Yeah.
regardless of how you felt about it. I think it makes for a really good discussion, and I that's one of the things I like about dystopian novels is because you can compare the parallels to our lives
Mhm.
and talk about, like, do we think that's the thing I think is so fascinating about dystopian novels is you can always ask the question, "Do you think that this could happen in real life?"
Mm.
Um, and so I'm curious, would you pick a dystopian novel again?
Oh yeah. Oh
Okay,
yeah. I
cool.
mean, this is just not normally what I would have said as dystopian. It just didn't feel like it to me.
That's fair. Yeah.
It felt more like science fiction. Um, and I don't even know if it was really science fiction. I mean, like, really, the only
Speculative
thing that
fiction.
took me out of it being current times was the technology.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I appreciate everyone who's hung out with us for 2 hours and 12 minutes.
And who
I
took the
think
time to read this because it's a lot of time to do
yes,
a book.
it is.
It always is. So thank you.
Um, but honestly, what do you are you still staying with your rating? Are you still thinking that this is a 4-star read for you?
I think that I am, and I think I say that because there is enough here and there was enough good in the book that I think it outweighed the parts that could have been written differently or maybe could have been better, which is the reason why it's not a 5, right? But it was
Mhm.
good enough that I was like, I read it once, it was impactful the one time. I don't need to read it again.
Mhm.
What about you?
I think I don't know. I think I'm being too hard on just the fact that the things I didn't like about it was like the formatting and, my expectations weren't met. That's why it won't be a 5-star for me, the expectations or whatever. But I think it could have been a little bit shorter. And I do think that there were some parts that had lulls in it that I was a little bored
Yep.
and I just wanted to get going or whatever. But
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, and I struggled with it. But at the same time, I have gone back when I was doing my notes and rereading sections of it that I thought were written well. I think he writes well.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to discount that. I'm leaning more like a 3.5, maybe round into a 4 on Goodreads. And then also
Okay.
to just sitting with it and then writing out a physical review might determine. But I think a 3.5 as of this moment, just because I do think the things that I found problematic are just like a personal thing, not so much what he's trying to say in it, you know? The
Kat, you know what
concept.
that means? It means that for every single book that we have reviewed, we have been within at least a half a star of each other every single time. So that's
That's
if we
why I
didn't
think
completely
discussions
agree.
are important because I do think that, something gets brought up, like you bringing up the timeline, me wanting it to be shorter chapters or like in a short story format, which it kind of felt a little bit like that. But you talking about the timeline for certain characters makes sense to me. We wouldn't have seen that growth, or not growth, or I don't think it's growth, when Emily is deciding that she thinks this is great. What do we call that? Her downfall.
Her development, yeah.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. So let's see. Telcana said also read Allegiant this month, so I'm ready for a dystopian break. Oh yeah, we won't be
You
doing
poor
a
thing.
dystopian book for a while. It didn't feel like dystopia to me. It felt like social commentary. The
That's
same because
fair.
it felt more like a nonfiction story.
Mhm.
Enjoyed the discussion. Thank you so much, Linda. I
Thanks, Linda.
appreciate that. Stina's going to stick with her 4. Thank you
Ooh,
very much. We appreciate you saying that. Mama Maggie said 3 stars for me because the jumping around lost me too many times. Yes. I think I would read sections of it again. And that's why I said I think when I do my review for it, that'll be probably what I do because I did reread sections preparing for this. A dystopian I finished today and I like was Filmlandia by Christina Dolce.
I've never heard of that.
And Mama Maggie's brother gave it 4 stars.
Great.
And high five. And Fameldi is on my TBR. Such a great discussion. Can't wait for the next one. Thank you so much,
Thank
Liz. I
you.
appreciate it. And I hope you do finish the book. I know you were getting to the end. Thank you so much, Keaton. We
Thanks,
appreciate
Ian.
that. Thank you,
Thanks,
Jamie. Thank you
Jamie.
so
Thank
much,
you,
Stina.
Stina.
And before we hop off, we do want to let everybody know that our next book is Deacon King Kong by James McBride. And I'm
Yes.
looking very much forward to this one. This one's been on my shelf for a little bit, and I think it's going to be a good time. It'll be very different from what we read.
Yeah, very different vibe if you want to pick
Yes.
up something that is more your jam, this might be it.
Yeah. So anyway, we hope that y'all will join us for Deacon King Kong. We will have that will be our July, August, and our
Yes.
live stream is going to be August the 28th, the last Thursday, and it will be on Alex's channel for that discussion.
Yes.
So, yes, thank y'all very, very much. We really appreciate y'all being here and sticking with us. This was long. I didn't realize how long it was.
We always talk for about 2 hours, Kat, it's fine. I think this one was a little bit longer than normal, but
Yeah.
that's okay.
Okie
People stuck it
dokie.
out with us. I guess you like hearing us enough. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. We appreciate that, Jamie. And until we meet again, everyone, y'all have
Yeah.
a fantastic evening, wonderful weekend, and we will see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.